Okay, everybody, please take your seats. We're going to get started on our next presentation here. Just as a reminder, my name is Lauren Taylor, and I am very excited to announce our next presenters. We have Jackie Corday, who is the owner of Corday Natural Resources Consulting, co-founder and co-chair of the Colorado Healthy Headwaters Working Group and the Riverscape Restoration Network. And we also have Alicia Marrs, who is the director of Western Water and the National Wildlife Federation. Today they will be speaking on a comprehensive review of state and tribal beaver plans or programs across the US and the UK, what's working well and making a difference. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lauren. So I'm going to kick it off here. Again, Alicia Marrs. I'm the director of Western Water for the National Wildlife Federation. Many of you probably know my predecessor better, Sarah Bates, who I have the honor of following in her footsteps. And to kick things off, before we get into the report that Jackie's working on, I'm going to give a really quick overview of what NWF is doing in the beaver space. And largely, if not all, this is Sarah's legacy, but is being led primarily by our team from Montana that's actually here. So I really encourage you finding them. Our tables in the back. So Shelby Wigand, Alyssa Chott, Kyle Wonders, and Chris Austin are all here and our beaver experts, and they can fill in the gaps and the specifics on this work much better than I can. So the Western Water Program at NWF covers the entire West, but a majority of our work, especially in this space when it comes to beaver coexistence and low-tech process-based restoration that's happening on the ground, is happening in Montana and led by the team that I just mentioned. We're really thinking through, how we can leverage beavers to enhance watersheds across the West. And so the mission, you think about NWF, you might think of our friend Ranger Rick, and there's some Ranger Rick magazines in the back. But we are looking at things through the lens of wildlife, and how can wildlife contribute to the healthier lands and waters of our country. And so the Western Water Program, we're really excited to be growing into this space and really leaning into beavers are a great mechanism, not just to tell this story, but to articulate and actually accentuate and leverage their ecological engineering capabilities across the board. So the three primary ways that we're working in this space, and which has also inspired how we kind of got into this conversation in Colorado that will lead into where Jackie's report is, our collaboration, education, beaver-inspired restoration, and policy and advocacy. So just to touch on this briefly, in Montana, there is not a statewide beaver management plan right now. And I just want to underscore that, as Jackie goes through her presentation, looking at all the different approaches to how beavers are managed, both at the tribal and state level, it really is on a case-by-case basis. And what we talk about mostly when we're talking about beaver coexistence and the best way to work with beavers is really where they're most appropriate. And that's where we can really leverage that community support and community buy-in and really build in acceptance and that resilience to having beavers on the landscape where they work and where they may not be the best choice. There's lots of other options that we can use that are often inspired by beavers. So low-tech process-based restoration, I'm just going to say LTPBR from here on out. I think this group knows that, I hope. But in Montana, there is a beaver white paper authored primarily by Tori Ritter from Montana Parks and Wildlife, and I think he's here and I know giving another presentation, so again, encourage you to go to that. But that really drives the statewide approach in terms of how beavers are managed, we'll say, but dealt with and worked with across the board. Spawning from that, and I used to work a lot with fish, so sorry, the fish puns start filtering in here periodically. So the Montana Beaver Working Group was formed, which is now housed under NWF, but is really a collaborative approach led primarily in part by Shelby and Alyssa on our team, but has done an amazing job of bringing together stakeholders from the state and federal partners, but also nonprofits, private landowners, across the board to really implement what's in the white paper and develop this Montana Beaver Action Plan, which is updated periodically. I believe we also have a copy or two in the back of those, so if you want to go take a peek in a hard copy, not on your phone or a laptop, I know, novel, I highly recommend it. So this group gets together, I think, twice annually, physically, in person, which is really important for building those community connections. There's a newsletter that I highly recommend you subscribe to. And again, this is a diverse group, including our tribal partners, and finding ways to really leverage the knowledge on the ground of how folks are working with beavers and what's working. And then it inspired what is our Beaver Conflict Resolution Program. That also is housed within NWF in close partnership with the state and other partners. And so Chris and Kyle, who are here, are two of our Beaver Tech Conflict Resolution Fellows who are actually physically located in two of FWP's regions and have, believe it or not, a beaver hotline that you can call if you do have a beaver problem, and they do answer, and go out and help landowners mitigate the impacts of beavers and think about the ways that we can live together. Alyssa made some amazing dioramas that are in the back and brought with her on the plane, so feel free to go over and see. And this is one of the ways that we work through with the community and educate them on what it looks like so it's not quite as intimidating. So again, beavers aren't the right solution everywhere, but we can learn from them and do beaver-inspired restoration. Shelby leads great teams, including with Montana Conservation Corps, out on the landscape implementing low-tech process-based restoration projects. I did it. I didn't do the acronym, sorry. And this is a great aerial from recently when we were all out in the field. This is Gold Creek, which is on BLM land, but has been a flagship site for us to not only do restoration, mimicking beavers, but also bring folks out from the community, from our federal partners and others, to learn and see this kind of restoration in action. It's really, one of those gems to really understand. So a great example of this is Shelby and Alyssa have been doing trainings with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they've been bringing folks out from across the country to do summer workshops and trainings in Montana. Sounds great, especially if they're folks coming from Louisiana or other parts of the country, and they get to see these restoration practices in action, and hopefully they can then go back and have a better understanding of how these processes work when they're seeing the permits coming across the board or their desks. And then finally, this is where I tend to get more involved with our team, but we have been leaning in more and more on policy and advocacy. The Guide to Advocating Beaver Restoration in National Forest Plans, that's another amazing resource that Sarah Bates put together while she was at NWF, and I highly recommend you take a look at it. We also have a hard copy in the back. It's on our website. A group of partners that I work really closely with, TRCP, Alex Funk, Faye Hartman from American Rivers, Amy McNamara from NRDC, and others got together, a little over a year ago, I'd say a year and a half ago, and with other partners were able to put together a letter of recommendations for comments to the Wildfire Mitigation and Management Commission. This was a group through Congress that ultimately, when they came together, were able to incorporate, I think, all of our comments, all in support of thinking through better ways to incorporate beaver-inspired restoration, nature-based solutions when we're thinking about the wildfire beaver nexus, which we heard some awesome anecdotes about from Dr. Fairfax. And then, and more as we know, beavers are making their march to the Hill, whether it's at the state level or at the US Congress. So there's a snapshot of the Beaver Act, and I know there's the Dams for Beaver Act. The more and more we see legislation coming up through and at Congress, the better. Even if they don't all pass, the opportunities for us to lift these up and do advocacy at the local level with your local representatives is just adding a few more logs onto that beaver dam that we're all hoping to build. So that's just a snapshot, and I know many of you are part of these efforts, and so thank you for your collaboration, and I think there's going to be a lot more detail as we go through the rest of the week, so I highly encourage you to seek out Shelby and Alyssa and Chris and Kyle if you have other questions about our work on the ground. And I'm going to now segue a little bit, because of our work in Montana. We were really excited when Alex Funk from TRCP and Jackie Corday came to us and said, what do you guys think about, how do we encourage the state of Colorado to maybe start thinking about developing a statewide beaver management plan? So a little over a year ago, we started thinking through this, and in November, we teamed up. We saw the commission requested CPW, that's Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I think this is going to be quite the acronym soup of a week here, to start thinking about incorporating and developing what would a beaver management plan look like if the state decided to take that route. In February of last year, we teamed up with many other organizations in this room to send a letter to further encourage this process to be as collaborative and transparent as possible. And then in April, we were really excited when not only did the commission bring it to the table as an agenda item, but the CPW actually came and showed that they were actively thinking about what kind of processes they might take. And not only were they kind of gelling, but Governor Polis showed up. And this was the first time I think he had been to a commission meeting in person and to voice his support for our beaver restoration program. So all of that said, we want to help. And so we started talking more with Jackie, and she's been spearheading an effort to research all the different ways that beavers are managed, both at the state and tribal and other levels. So I'm going to pass it on to her to preview the report that she's working on. Should we kill that? Maybe just use that one.
Yep. Oh well. Let me see if, does it, no, this is not working? It is? Okay, great. Feels like that one's not really working that great. All right. Just this one? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll, oops, there we go. All right, so what we're going to be covering today is the report that Alicia mentioned that we've been working on for the better part of this year, to try to gather in one place information about what our states and local governments and tribes all doing in this space of a more coordinated effort to basically partner with Beaver and work on watershed restoration holistically. So I'm going to be going through some of the key chapters that are in this report. It's still a work in progress. I'm still drafting it and hope that our latest schedule is that it will come out in January. But really, what I wanted to do with this presentation is just hopefully inspire you all to be thinking about how to come together in a coordinated way. I know planning is not a sexy topic. There's a lot of more interesting topics that are going to be presented, but I hope that you come away from this understanding like how important it is to bring everybody together for this type of planning. And the planning can be done on a local level, regional level, statewide level. I'm mainly going to be focusing on statewide. And these chapters mirror what is typically in a statewide beaver management plan. So think of them both ways, what's going to be in the report and what's typically in a plan. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is that all 50 states have state wildlife agencies, and all of those wildlife agencies are responsible for wildlife management, and one of the key ways, of course, is hunting and trapping. And so they all have fur bearer management approaches for that, and setting seasons for trapping. And then all states also have a nuisance regulation for beaver, because beavers can cause quite a bit of challenges. All the states also allow for nuisance trapping. But what's really important is to be able to move beyond just thinking about it in game regulation and nuisance regulation, and that's what this report is about. Why would you want to think about it beyond that? Some of the speakers before us have already laid down the foundation about historic beaver populations not having recovered in many places around the United States, particularly the western states, from their historic levels. Professor Ellen Wool showed that great slide about here in Colorado. There's still a lot of room for beavers to be able to come back, especially in the upper watersheds where they can do so much benefit. So that's kind of one of the foundational things, knowing that the populations have not recovered from the 1800 trapping and many other reasons. So a plan could be beneficial and important in recognition of the important benefits of beavers, building support for non-lethal management. You'll hear so much at this conference about coexistence and how critical that is. Doesn't matter what state you're in or what country you're in, it's a foundational key important topic to be talking about how to live with beaver. Coordinate existing federal, state, and local efforts to encourage beaver-assisted restoration, and direct public and private funds to increase beaver-assisted restoration activities. These bullet points came out of the letter that Alicia mentioned that a whole bunch of groups came together to share with the CPW, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and the Commission. And so these are direct quotes from that. And this is just one of another example. Alexis Whipple shared with me a map of a watershed out of the Methau Basin showing that there's only 18% occupied of historic capacity in a watershed, as you can see, that is not highly developed. It's probably a good part of it is national forest. So it's just another example of how beaver need some assistance in being able to come back. So what are the main barriers? Again, a lot of folks in the audience know these barriers, but maybe you don't know the statistics of just how degraded the habitat is. And as Professor Ellen Wool was saying, it's really important to be thoughtful in thinking about how to partner with beaver and mapping and prioritizing where it's going to be appropriate for them to come back, because a lot of the habitat is so degraded, their former habitat is so degraded, they can't just be dropped anywhere and think that they're going to survive. So it's really important to understand that. And then social and human conflicts or concerns are, of course, one of the biggest things that have to be addressed. You can see there the common concerns from landowners, water users, and then biologists, right? This is a common theme that you're going to also hear. I'm glad there's going to be a whole session about fish issues. Those two are by far, my research so far is they are by far the biggest barriers, the habitat and the social issues. Trapping and hunting, I'm finding that in the conversations and what I have found so far is that is not a big population factor, except locally. I've definitely talked to folks who have done restoration work, and they've gotten frustrated by just the beaver being trapped out and gone, and they felt like their hard work was almost for nothing. But as far as population concern, that I have not seen in the research that overall that is a population concern, and it's, as you will see in the report, it's still a very important management tool for across all 50 states. All right, so what usually goes into a chapter? So these slides are really for you thinking about overall, if you were thinking about a state wildlife plan, a beaver management plan in your state, what would be foundational to be going into that plan? First off, beaver natural history, the importance of beaver. That's just a foundational thing that should be really well documented in the plan. Current population distribution, and where are they, where were they historically, where are they now? Where could they be? Again, with really good mapping tools, where could they be again? Then a summary of talking about your process of adopting that plan, key stakeholders and their input and perspectives on their concerns and their goals is really critical. Native American perspectives, the importance of beaver to their culture, the land, the water, and wildlife, and their knowledge of how and where beaver used to live on the landscapes before they were all trapped out. Agriculture, water and land use management agencies, managers of conservation NGOs, hunters and trappers, departments of transportation. These are all really key stakeholders to have early on in the process of contributing to what needs to be in that beaver restoration plan. And then, of course, early in the chapter, what were the top goals? Based on all of that input and that information gathered, what are going to be some of the top goals of your plan? How are you going to implement them? Other chapters, of course, that are really key that you'll see is living with beaver. Coexistence is a very important one. Watershed habitat restoration. There, you'll see later in the PowerPoint, there's a great plan that talks about that. Beaver restoration strategies, actions that can help beaver stay in place. Stream wetland restoration, where streams are really degraded in their former habitat and then they need a little kickstart. And then they could be recolonized naturally if there are beaver populations still in the greater area, and then relocation. So examples, now we're going to go into a couple of examples that are around the state. So there's different forms of beaver management plans that I found as I was doing the research. Some are called statewide beaver management plans. Others were fur bearer management plans. So there's different types of examples. I'm going to highlight one here that is a statewide beaver management plan. And this was adopted by the Utah Wildlife Board in 2017 after a advisory committee had come together that was a team of Utah Division of Wildlife staff, and it takes a lot of different ologists to come together as a team. Fisheries, terrestrial, aquatic ologists all need to come together. And then you can see who the other stakeholders were that were also there early in the process, and their goals. And so these are really important because you're going to see these throughout the different plans that I'm highlighting. Maintain healthy beaver populations. Expand distribution where appropriate. The plan started out by acknowledging that beaver populations had not recovered from the 1800s trapping and poor habitat for a lot of streams. So that was important that they acknowledged early up. And then they said, we're going to maintain and expand where there's possibilities. Respond timely to beaver complaints and increase non-lethal options. Another super important goal for all plans, no matter where you are in which state or which country. This is an important goal. Increase watershed restoration through nuisance beaver relocation where appropriate. Fortunately, we have some really awesome relocators that are going to be talking about this in different sessions, so I'm not going to go into that too much. And then education. And this is what was really important and acknowledged in the plan. Education not only of external partners and landowners, but internal staff. That was really important to also understand that they had staff on board that had, you know, either even information from a long time ago and they hadn't been brought up to speed on what the science is around beaver. And coexistence, success, and ability to be able to do that. So it was important just to have that acknowledged in the plan, internal and external. Implementation. Of course, this is the most key thing. You don't want to spend all this time and resources on developing a plan and then have it sit on the shelf. And this is where I hope to inspire everybody in this room, because everybody has a role in this implementation, because there's so many different skills and knowledge and background that needs to come together to really help implement a plan, right? You need people that are really good at education and communication. You need people that are have the wildlife understanding, the background and the professional expertise on that. You need tribes with their knowledge of what was there before, what can be again, and how they lived with beaver, how it was such an important part of their culture. So you need everybody at the table to draft it and then to help implement it. And so, of course, the key implementation here again is education and training around coexistence, and then relocation efforts. There's just some amazing people in Utah in the Division of Wildlife that are implementing the plan and also at the University of Utah State University, the Beaver Ecology and Restoration Center is just doing amazing work. So it's all different partners coming together. The Forest Service is like one of the key places where these beaver are going to after they've been trapped. They're all nuisance beaver. That when I talk to folks about their programs, these are beaver that are otherwise going to be killed. And they're coming to relocation centers to be cared for and then taken out and relocated on Forest Service sites. And I just wanted to read this one. One of the program leads said, she is so thrilled with the results. She's been doing it for about 8 years and seen evidence of about a 75% survival rate. And that's because of the best management practices that I'll talk about. This was a really great plan to come across too. How many in this room had heard that Pennsylvania had adopted a plan? Okay, not too many. I didn't know before I started doing this research. I surely knew about Utah, but I didn't know about Pennsylvania. And this was spearheaded and really a work of passion by an aquatic biologist and that worked for the Pennsylvania Game. And I wanted to just talk about how it started right off in the executive summary, acknowledging Native American culture values. And this is a quote, "Respect for beaver was replaced by European greed over a 300-year period that nearly wiped out US populations." And in fact, in Pennsylvania, they completely did wipe out the population. It was 0. That's not the case in many other states, but it did happen in Pennsylvania. And so it's, that was really important to acknowledge right off the bat. And so the plan provides the necessary direction to achieve enhanced population. Again, you're hearing the same goals. Improved beaver damage understanding, tolerance, and problem resolution, and increased public awareness. So really 3 key goals again. I wish I had time to tell you more about this plan. I really loved it. So I would like to tell you more, but there'll be more in the report. And then you can Google it yourself if you want to find out more about it. I'm not going to have time to go through all of these other examples. So there's one in Oregon that's a 3-year plan, and this is a graphic from that Oregon plan of talking about data science, habitat restoration, beaver management, and outreach, the kind of the pillars of the plan. Montana also has, as Alicia mentioned, a beaver working group, and they created a plan based on everybody coming together and drafting it. But it's not, as she mentioned, a statewide plan. It was a plan that was adopted by this group, the Beaver Working Group. Wisconsin has a plan. Nevada has a statement from wildlife commissioners, not a plan, but the statement is important. Nevada's beaver population recognized as a valuable element of Nevada's natural and historic heritage is a statement that's in the policy that the Wildlife Commission adopted. And next up, as you heard from Wade Crowfoot, it's so exciting to hear what comes out of California next. Okay, I wanted to give one example of local government. There are so many, and it's such an important work that's happening across the United States when local government, whether it's a county or a city, also adopts a plan because they have so many extra challenges, social, human conflict challenges. So having their plan as well is really important. I'm just going to pull out one example that just really rose to the top for me. And that was beavers in King County. This is, here is a website that they created with all of those topics. One of the champions for making that all happen is Jen Vanderhoof, and she's here, and I'm excited to get to meet her and listen to her talk. And this is the area that they're working in. King County is 1.3 million acres, and you can see all of the huge amount of population that's there. And so I encourage you, if you want to find a really great example of local government doing great work, just Google King County in Washington. All right, now examples of tribal programs. Again, I wish I could have time to tell you a lot more about this. It was really wonderful to be able to find some great examples that I could include in this presentation, and in the report there'll be more. But at a really high level, I think almost everybody has heard of the Tulalip Beaver project and the incredible work that they're doing, and Molly Alves is here, who was instrumental in that. But I did want to read this quote because I just love this quote. The Tulalip Beaver project came to life in 2014 after former Treaty Rights Director Terry Williams attended a salmon restoration summit where attendants were asked to dream of new, less expensive ways of addressing salmon decline on a landscape scale. And this was from a PowerPoint that I'm sure, Molly, you started out with that PowerPoint, and now you've passed it on to Dylan Collins, an assistant wildlife biologist with the tribe, and he loaned me that quote. Again, they acknowledge that beaver have not completely recuperated or restored from 1800s trapping. And this is the area where they are really started focusing early on in the project. The reservation is there in the red, and they were working in the Stillaguamish and the Snohomish watersheds. And actions to implement, Molly has spent a whole presentation on this, and I've only got a moment because there's just so much they've done. It's so inspiring. But the holding facility, I got to visit that in May and see it, a fish hatchery that's still operating. And they dedicated 2 runs to the beaver restoration program, and the other runs are still operating as a fish hatchery. Policy work, incredible policy work as well. A lot of foundational work on best management practices all the way through the process of capturing beaver, the holding facility care and relocation, release site identification, so much on that. And this is just one of my favorite pictures in the world. Oh my gosh. But this was another one I borrowed from Dylan's slide, and Molly knows probably right where this is. It's just so incredibly beautiful, and this was a relocation site, a successful site in Washington. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. The Yakima Nation in south central Washington. You can see where the reservation is, but you can see in the gold color that was the ceded area, and still, of course, very near and dear to their hearts. So they are working in that whole area. And again, they're doing so much work that it's hard to boil it down into this one slide. They are doing work directly as a tribe, or they're doing it as a partner with other tribes and other partners. And so there's a couple of different examples here of a 2010 to 2015 program that, as you can see what they said, aimed at increasing stream complexity and riparian system function by live trapping problem beaver in the Yakima Basin, and then strategically relocating them to places where they can do so much beneficial good. And of course, they had a matrix on how and where to pick those sites, including lower risk for social conflict. And then another group that is currently working is also, I love these words, our mission is to retain, restore, and rehome. I think that was the first time I had seen rehome, and I just love that. And then the Yurok tribe in Northern California, the Klamath River region, they are also doing a lot of incredible work. And they're one of the many tribes that advocated for the big policy and funding changes that Wade Crowfoot talked about. And this is another quote that's just such a beautiful quote from Frankie Myers, the vice chair of the Yurok tribe. Beavers are always right. There is no beaver-human conflict. There's only human conflict. What we've learned, having lived for thousands of years here, is that it's an extremely important part of our way of life, not only as indigenous people, but as human beings here on this planet. Okay, I'm going to have to make up some time by not spending a lot of time on this because, again, Molly and her colleagues are going to be doing a great time on going through these kinds of things, but this is what I wanted to have in the report. What are the types of facilities? Who built and manages them? This is important information for other folks who are thinking about being able to do this and seeing that there's a lot of different models out there for how to go about this. And protocols. This is one of the most key things. If the research around beaver relocation shows nothing else, it's about how important to think about where you're putting them, how you're caring for them, how you're prepping the site, thinking through all of those things. Those are basically can be boiled down to best care protocols, best management practices. And so I've just been bringing together a lot of different commonalities that I'm seeing from the different programs that are working on beaver relocation. These are just a few of the bullets. There'll be a lot more information in the report. I did want to, because I didn't see anybody, is there anybody from Wyoming that came? Okay, great. Because that was so incredible. I got to go up in August and meet with the folks from the Wyoming Wetlands Society to see their fairly brand new beaver facility, and I felt like it was like pretty state of the art. State of the art from the perspective of how to reduce stress on captured beaver and how to make the facility daily cleanup more efficient and not backbreaking for your staff or your volunteers. And that's important because there's a lot of work that goes into caring for the beaver, caring for these facilities and making them run. So you really need to be thinking through that. And so they've been doing this for over 15 years, but this facility was just built in 2023. And it was a marvel for me to see how well it is run. And really, bottom line, it's about, again, reducing stress, increasing success for beaver being relocated, and a success for your staff. And here's a fellow that, if you don't know about him, Google this. Jerry Altermat gave this talk, Ecosystem Engineers, the Role of Beaver in Wyoming Recovering Ecosystems in 2023. And if you Google that, you'd be able to find the presentation. What a wonderful presentation. It just was such a pleasure to talk to this man and how dedicated he is. He is a terrestrial biologist, not an aquatic biologist, but a terrestrial. But he knows how important beaver are to all aquatic and terrestrial species. And so he is also kind of a hobby engineer, and he came up with this design. And when I went through it with him and saw how state-of-the-art it was, I was like, wow, this is just amazing. Would you share that with people? Because that costs time and money to come up with designs like this. And he said, yeah, just have people email me. Just have them reach out to me. So that was really wonderful. And I love this quote. He emphasized that partnering with beaver versus relying on low-tech PBR is the way to go because they do it better. They do it free for 24/7, plus he didn't have to go and get a Division of Water Resources permit to be able to do beaver relocation, and that was important. Okay, so we're coming close to the end here, and this is an important slide that I just want to mention because I think in my research I came across a lot of people that would say, well, why would you do relocation of beaver? I've heard that it's not successful. And so that was important to find out, well, you know, if, in those historical pictures, and you saw the ones of the beavers parachuting out, I think what's important to understand is that it's been over 100 years since people have been doing this, and specifically the wildlife agencies were doing it in a big way in the 1920s, in the 1930s and 40s to help reestablish beaver populations because they had been so decimated. So they were looking for all kinds of ways to do that. Well, really, they were so successful that now beaver in all 50 states are considered common. They're not at threat, they're not endangered. There are some places that they are not still, but they're not at threat. And so the point is that they were so successful that people now can build off on that early research and say, okay, how can we increase their success? And so success is generally defined, and this is really generally defined, as beavers surviving signs of beaver activity at or near release site following the spring or the next summer when sites are often checked. That is real general because as you'll find out when you get into this topic, there's a lot of different definitions of success, but this one seemed to come up the most. And so, again, success ranges widely based on conversations and research from 20 to 75%. But what I found was that people had mostly heard of the 20%. We need to get more word out that, hey, you can take it from that more dismal 20% to 75%, like some of these folks that I talked to, based on really, great information about how to increase their survival. And it has a lot to do with really good site conditions. You've done your homework on where they are going to go back to. It's not completely degraded. There's vegetation, there's water there that they can survive. And this, again, is super high level. There'll be more information in the report. But having that food, the water, the shelter is critical to survival is already present. Over and over again, I found that if you did some BDA work prior, because most of the systems you're going to be working in, of course, are degraded. So doing some BDA work prior, especially if it's in a high predator area, can help increase the depth of the water before they even get there, and they can build on those. Beaver care, BMPs to lower stress and capture, holding, and release. And I often found that involvement of wildlife professionals was also important, people that really had a really good understanding of beaver behavior and biology, and also human behavior, because remember, social issues are the biggest issues. And then beaver families, capturing and releasing beaver families or mated pairs whenever possible was a lot about what was in the research as well. Then I just have one slide on the UK. I'm so excited to go to the presentation from folks from England and Wales. So I just have one slide from the UK. Is there anybody here from Scotland? No? Nope. Oh, there's somebody. Awesome. And so this is just a really quick timeline of what's happening just in that one country. 2009, first government-approved beaver release project. Now, they had been extinct, like in Pennsylvania. They had not been there. They were completely extinct, and they were able to come back because of a lot of passionate people. The Parliament approved legislation designating them as a protected species. I guess I'm running out of time. I won't have time to go through this, but anyway, you can Google this. There's so many inspiring stories that's happening all around the UK. And the 10th International Beaver Symposium is going to be there. How cool is that? In Inverness next year. Last slide. Oh, there it is. What approaches seem to be most effective? And so again, you've heard a lot of these things over and over again. Coordinated planning developed by State Wildlife Agency with public process stakeholders. We've talked about who all the important stakeholders are there. Regional are also important, or local. And the key strategies: coexistence, education, key to no matter what state or country you're in, and then potentially, depending on the populations in your state and the social tolerance, potentially relocation and restoring. And then support for research and monitoring. There are a lot of gaps in knowledge that's important to be coordinating and researching. So thank you very much.